In this video, we'll be looking at the teacher notes for Lesson 23, Examining Scatter Plots. In our student notes, we introduced the acronym DOFS, D-O-F-S. D was for direction, O was for outlier, F is for form, and S is for strength. What I want to drive home for you is what I expect for the students to be able to say, what I want the students to be able to communicate. What should my student communicate? Right. What I want my student to be able to say is whenever we have a positive trend, a positive relationship, I want them to be able to state that as X increases, and by X increases I mean contextually, with words from the problem, as X increases, Y increases. Now less frequently, but analogously, we want to also, the same situation is X decreases, Y decreases. So they should be at least aware of that. When it is negative trend, I want them to be able to say as X increases, Y decreases. Or vice versa. X decreases, Y increases. Typically, we're thinking, as we do in algebra, is moving from left to right. So as we read, as X increases, Y decreases, or as X increases, Y decreases. But these other two also indicate their particular trends. Let's look back at our notes and from the student notes and talk about these two interpretations. All right, so in our first example here of number of hours studied in grades, we want the students to be able to say that this is a linear positive trend, and it looks pretty strong. Contextually, I want them to be able to say as the number of hours studied increases, the grades tend to increase. Contrasting that with our negative trend here, again, it is linear, moderate perhaps, and negative. So the interpretation, as the number of absences increase, grades tend to decrease. All right. One student activity is going to I suggest the following student activity that we will use during the first 3 lessons at least of this week. Student activity. You are going to have the students examine the relationship between 3 variables. They are going to look at how height is explained by forearm length, and alternately how height is explained by head length. In both of these cases, y is my response variable, my dependent, and these two guys are going to be my independent. Both forearm length and head length are positively associated with height. That is, as our heads get larger, we tend to be taller, and as our forearms are longer, we tend to be taller. But in many years of doing this experiment, I have found that forearm length has a much stronger correlation with height than head length. I think this is probably true in general, but it's particularly true with regards to this experiment. But one reason is that head length is a little bit harder to determine than forearm length. You're going to see more variability with this measurement. But in either case, it gives you plenty to talk about with regards to this particular topic and the next two topics, which are correlation and regression. So, how are you going to conduct this experiment? Well, you will measure the height, okay? Teacher measures height. You measure the height of every student. The way I suggest doing this is up against your wall, mark 6 feet. And then just have every one of your students stand up against right underneath that mark and measure down for most of them and do a subtraction, or measure up for the one or two basketball players in your class that are over 6 foot tall. So you're going to measure the height of every student. While you are measuring the height, group the students. Not a random grouping, but a grouping where you have at least one decent leader within every group. Okay, within these groups, you're going to have the students measure their head length, and measure their forearm length. So each group will create a table. And this table will be x1, x2, and y. Our y variable is going to be our height, and x1 and x2 are forearm length and head length, and it doesn't matter which one you call which. So each group will have a measurement for their forearm, a measurement for their head, and a measurement for their height. What do we need to measure this in? Well, it doesn't matter. You can use inches, you can use centimeters. With regards to looking at association, correlation, and regression, and the unit is totally does not matter. Our students are more familiar with feet and inches, so I suggest using that. Tips for measurement. To measure forearm length, have your student place their elbow on their desk, then make a mark right where their elbow meets the desk, and then make another mark where this most prominent bone is in your wrist. Then simply measure the distance between the two marks. To measure head length, we will use the 3-ruler method. The student being measured will be seated. They will place 1 ruler under their chin, 1 ruler on top of their head, and the group leader will come and measure the distance between the 2 rulers.